All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Change is Easy, but you go first. Tools for leading people through organizational change. I am Laurel Bellman and I will be moderating this session. Our speakers are Jenny Erickson and Kate Kingery, and they're going to go ahead and introduce themselves and their office, and then they're going to give their presentation. And we'll have some time at the end for questions. So please put any questions you might have in the chat and I will read those out at the end. Also, please note that we are recording this presentation and an accessible video will be available for viewing on the IT Professionals Conference website next week if you want to either revisit the session or if you want to share it with a friend. All right, well, I think now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jenny and Kate for their presentation. Thank you very much for joining us today.
All right, thanks, Laurel. Welcome, everybody. We're thrilled that you're here and we look forward to talking about change, and this is going to have some interactive aspects of this presentation as well, too. My name is Kate Kingery. I'm the Director of Strategic Consulting for the Office of Strategic Consulting here on the UW campus. And I'm here today with my colleague, Jenny Erickson. Jenny, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Hi, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jenny Erickson. I work with Kate in the Office of Strategic Consulting. My title is Capacity Building Lead, and that means in this situation, it means that I'm working on how do we build capacity across campus to get better at the kinds of things that our office does. And Kate's going to talk a little bit more about what those are, but that's where my focus is.
Great. Thanks, Jen. As Laurel mentioned, she's going to be monitoring the chat, so feel free to chat in your questions or comments or if you need anything. And Jen, are you advancing slides? There we go. All right. So this is the point where I usually ask, how many of you know about or have worked with the UW Office of Strategic Consulting? I obviously can't see everybody, but if you feel like raising your hand, if you have, wherever you're at, that's great. That's our first interactive experience. But for those of you who aren't familiar with our office, as I mentioned, we're based here on campus, and we work with every academic and administrative unit across campus. And our focus specifically is on organizational effectiveness. And so if your unit has an interest in strategic planning or is looking at a process improvement, or is looking for a consultant to come and work with you on developing a change management plan or providing guidance on how to implement a change management plan, that's what we're here for. And so we primarily focus on those organizational activities across campus, and we'll work with just about anybody. Thanks, Jen. Okay. So
Sorry, Kate.
That's okay. I know you don't know exactly where I'm going to stop, and I can't nod at you like I usually do. So there's a lot that we're going to cover today, but first and foremost, I want you all, wherever you are, to cross your arms. Now, I obviously can't see you cross your arms. I'm just going to assume that you're crossing your arms. Pretty easy to do. We do it all the time. It's instinctive. We probably didn't even think about it. Now I'm going to ask you to cross your arms in the opposite direction, and I still have to think about how I do that. Was it a little bit harder? Takes a little bit more. You have to think about it. Well, that's what change is like for most of us. We get used to our familiar patterns. We get used to the ways that we operate. We often don't think about it. It's instinctive. But then change comes and we have to think differently. We have to put some attention into it, some intention into it. And that's often what trips us up as we think about change and we go through that. So today we really want to talk about somebody asked a great question. Why is crossing the other way, or your arms the other way, so hard? I wish I knew physiologically why it is, but I definitely know it's like that pattern behavior really makes it more challenging. And the same in the workplace, the pattern behaviors that we get used to. And I imagine all of you are familiar with the rollout of that new process, that new system, the new technology and change that goes with that. So we're here to talk about ways in which we can help you deepen your knowledge about the phases of change, understanding how individuals may experience change. And so we've got some different models to show you of the different phases that people go through. We've got some frameworks that we want to share with you on planning for and implementing change, and then hopefully helping you to build your skills to address resistance to change. Because one of the things we like to say is that resistance is natural. And so not something to be feared. It's not futile. It is natural and something we prepare for. So we have a poll. Are we all set up to do the poll? All right. So Laurel, is there
Yes.
anything anybody needs to know before they do the poll?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So the question is, how do you react to change? And we've got 5 options. Bring it on. Let's stick with this, the tried and true. I need more information. What's in it for me? Or something other. So we'll give you a minute to answer the poll. How we doing on the results?
Pretty good. I can close it whenever you want. Ready?
Okay, your call, based on how many people.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can end it. All right, here we go.
Here we go. Oh, great. We've got some bring it on, folks. Love to see that always. And then we've got the I need more information. And that's where we've got a lot of folks. And that's a natural place to be. And often where we have most folks. What's in it for me? We're definitely going to talk about that today. And then other. And so we invite folks who answered other to share what that may mean for you all. All right. So a lot of the ways in which we think about change is reflective in how we like to deal with change and how we approach change and how we feel about change. But first and foremost, individual change matters. And so our organizations are made up of people. They are organisms. But we can't have organizational change, of course, unless individuals change. And so obviously, number one, we change for a reason. It may not always feel like it, but there is a reason or a rationale or some thinking or an argument behind why a change needs to happen. And oftentimes it's connecting with that reason and finding our relationship to that reason that helps us with that change. As I just mentioned, organizational change requires individual change. If a group of individuals don't change, our organizations don't change. We can't roll out that new system or that new technology unless people are willing to adopt it, no matter how hard we try. We're going to talk a lot about change management today. You're going to hear that phrase a lot. You may already be familiar. You may already be doing some of that work. But we think of change management really as about the people side of the change. So you may have your plan for this is what the rollout's going to look like for the technical aspects, but how are we going to get people on board? How will we get people to adopt the change? How will we get people to say, I'm in, so that we can have the intended outcome that we're seeking from the technical change. And then the last one, we apply change management to realize the benefits and desired outcomes of change. And so focusing on people so that we can have that experience of this is what we intended. I often ask the question, I ask people to raise hands. Have any of you been part of a change that didn't quite go as you planned? Oftentimes a lot of hands go up. My hand always goes up. So what does that mean? What does that look like? I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Jen Erickson, who's going to talk more about change management and how we can think about different frameworks and tools to get us to that place that maybe change will look more like we intend.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, change management. Kate did a great lead in to what is change management, right? So this comes straight out of ProSci, which is an organization that does a certification around change management tools. And so they define it as an application of a structured process and set of tools for leading the people side of change to achieve a desired outcome. I think with every change process, there are 3 components, right? You need a leadership component. There's always the technical actual change, right? Maybe the project management side of it. And then there's the people part of change. Today, we're going to focus mostly on that change management piece, the people side of change, which I think makes kind of natural sense, right? Because I can't think of a change personally that didn't involve somebody having to do something different. So to me, that feels kind of obvious that we need to really think about the people part of it. So what is change, right? Change is a process. We start in our current or present state, and then we develop perhaps a vision for where we want to be in the future. That's that desired future state. And somewhere in the middle is this transition, right? Where we are moving from one to the other. So we need to communicate that vision of the desired state as we plan for it. We act and hopefully everything goes well. But sometimes, as Kate mentioned, not all change processes go as planned. Maybe think back to a personal or organizational change you've experienced. Did it go as planned? Was it easy? Did you reach that desired state? I think sometimes the challenge is we have a great idea of where we want to end up, but in the change process, little pieces maybe of the present state get stuck, right? They get stuck and we kind of hold onto them and carry them forward into that future version of our work. And we may even pull forward some of the transition state. And so in the end, we have a future state that isn't exactly what we had envisioned originally, right? It's got little pieces of the present state, maybe some stuff we saved from the transitional time. We call this kind of a Swiss cheese version of what we were shooting for. And the idea of change management is, how do we help people fully transition from the present state to that desired future state? So, second and last poll. If you would help with this, Laurel, what do you think is the biggest barrier to leading change from your experience? Got the poll up? Let's see what you've got. See, about 70 people have, at 70% participation, close to 80. I think we're pretty good.
All right, sounds good.
So let's see what we've got here. So the big number has no clear vision for the desired future state. I have personally experienced that, so I can attest to that one. So if you don't exactly know what that desired future state looks like, it's really hard to get there, right? Lack of communication, we hear that a lot. This idea of, what is happening? What is the why? What do we need to know? So a lot of that. And I noticed there's one other. I didn't know if somebody felt comfortable sharing what their other response was. Maybe you put it.
Yeah, that was me. It was Robert Merrill.
All right, Robert.
And I think sometimes we are running so fast. Change takes emotional effort in addition to hours. And I think we're running so fast that we can't carve out the head space to do much more than react.
Yeah.
We've built an organization it's like a company that's built itself for like generating, cranking out a lot of stuff, but it isn't really set up for growth and change. It's just not aligned that way. And that's not good or bad, it's just a choice.
Yeah. And I think change on top of change on top of change on top of change can be another challenge, right?
There's fatigue.
Yep. Well, thank you for sharing, everyone. I'm gonna close this off and move to the next slide. Got a little bit of a delay, so sorry about that. So before we dig into the change model that we're gonna talk about, I think one of the really key first steps in any change is we need to get crystal clear on what will be different tomorrow. What is that we're asking people to do differently? Will there be a new process? Are we moving locations, or are we asking people to change their behaviors and their mindsets? Really getting clear about what we're asking folks to do. So step one, getting clarity on this key step. What are you changing? And I would like to introduce at this point an ad card change management model. And I'm just curious, with show of hands, are folks familiar with this change management model? Couple hands. I'm seeing a couple hands going up. So, but it looks like, so we're going to do a deep dive into this ad card model, and then I'm going to ask you to apply it to your own change process. And so we'll do a little personal reflection exercise. No breakout session, but just a personal kind of worksheet to kind of think through as you are leading change, perhaps in your home, office, wherever. So I want to do a little deeper dive talking about this ad card model. Ad card is a framework for understanding and applying many approaches to managing change. It can be both a planning tool and an assessment tool. We'll talk about both of those today. I also, it's linear, right? But not sequential, which means you can kind of slide backwards. ADKAR is a framework for understanding change at the individual level. So Kate talked about that. Change happens at the individual level. Organizations are made up of lots of individuals. So we're really focusing on how do we help that individual through that change. So, and this model can be extended to show how business, teams, organizations can increase the likelihood that changes are implemented successfully and we avoid that Swiss cheese future, right? So I'm going to walk through these building blocks of ADKAR, and then I'm going to, like I said, ask you to do a personal reflection on your team or the change you might be leading. I'm going to start with awareness, right? The first letter of ADKAR, awareness. So the first step is to enable change is to create awareness of the need for change, right? So in a recent study, 400 plus companies, the number one reason for resistance to change was the lack of awareness. The lack of, people didn't understand the why, right? And I think that was true in our poll too. What is your reaction to change? It was, I need more information. I need to know the why, right? So that's very common. I also think about John Cotter's work. He talks about the first step in leading change is really about creating a sense of urgency, the why and the why now. So, so as a change leader, I'll be thinking about, again, what is the actual change you're asking folks? Why is this happening now? That is critical to answer. That's that communication piece. And folks want to know what's wrong with what we're doing today, right? And what's the risk of not changing? I think that's the other key piece. What happens if we don't change? It's a critical factor in creating this awareness. A key piece of awareness is where people sit in their willingness to understand or kind of take in the why is where they sit in the organization, right? So there's a lot of factors that can influence awareness of the need for change. People do not take in information the same way. For example, they might be really enjoying the current state. Maybe this is a process they developed 28 years ago and have a lot of vested interest in it, right? So their ability to take in the why is going to be very different than the person who's struggling to implement this system, right? So acceptance of awareness messages is really influenced by a person's view of the current state, how vested they are. Also, the credibility of the sender, circulation of misinformation and rumors, all of these things kind of can impact your messaging around the why. So be aware of those and able to kind of think through those as you are thinking about how you communicate the why of your change. The D in ADKAR stands for desire, right? So it's the second element of ADKAR and represents the motivation and the ultimate choice to support and participate in this change. Once you're aware of the need for change, do you have the desire to make the change? Those are very different things, right? Not the same. This is where change leaders need to help folks make personal decisions. The what's in it for me, we talked about that, right? So how do you help folks understand what's in it for them? Why should they make this leap with you? What personal choices do they need to make? Do you need to make? And are they going to choose? Ultimately, it comes down to their willingness to make that decision to choose. So this is a big part of change. It's a critical piece. Will folks make the decision? And it's largely not in our control, right? So success or failure of change is whether or not people do anything differently. And change happens, again, at that individual level. So this is a graph, the Kubler-Ross change curve, otherwise known as, you might recognize it as the 5 stages of grief. So with a difficult change, there might be an initial shock, right? That's that first part of the curve. And then maybe some denial, and then frustration, maybe some depression. But then as you're starting to maybe implement a part of the change, there's some experimentation with this new change. And then this is at the point where individuals get to make the decision, right? They have the option to make the decision to implement the change. Oops, I went too far. Ooh, sorry. Oops, I lost my spot here. So anyways, they have the desire to make that change. So the key thing about this model is thinking about how you can support your team as they're experiencing these different phases, right? So where can you help them as they are in these different phases? And Kate's going to talk more about that at the end. But understanding that decision point, they get to make it, and how can you help support them in that? The K in ADKAR is all around knowledge, right? So once you're aware of the change, you have the motivation to change. Now you just need to know how to actually do it. What is maybe some training or skill building that you might need? What are the opportunities to learn new skills? I think this is an area that UW-Madison's really good at. I think we're built for this, right? So obviously lots of opportunities to think about how to build knowledge in your team. Formal training programs, coaching, all sorts of good things. But there are some real challenges too with this step. And we know that sometimes there's not enough time. Maybe there's not enough resources to actually be able to build those systems of knowledge building that you want. So there's some opportunities. Just be aware that there's some resistance factors there as well. And then the second A is in ADKAR is all about ability, right? So once you have the knowledge, can you implement the change? Knowledge doesn't always lead to ability. I think about parenting, right? I can read all the books on parenting, and then there's the actual doing it, which is a lot more challenging than reading the books and feeling like you've got the answers. So ability really represents that demonstrated capability to implement the change and achieve those desired results. And in terms of tactics for fostering ability, we talked a little bit about coaching before, maybe access to subject model experts, some hands-on practicing, use of having some experts kind of with you as you're going through it. But again, there's always some challenges, right? Again, with inadequate time or lack of support, some psychological blocks. There may just be individual capabilities that might be an issue or a challenge when you're building that ability in your team to make the change. So the last piece of ADKAR is the R, right? Reinforcement, final step. Reinforcement includes any action that or that strengthens and reinforces the change with an individual or an organization. So I'm curious if you would be willing to unmute yourself and maybe share, thinking about what you could do, or how can you build in systems to ensure that change sticks? What are some of the strategies that you use to build in that reinforcement to ensure that your change is going to stay there? Any thoughts about what you might be able to do? You can also put it in the chat. How do you reinforce change? As you're implementing change, what are some things that could be done? Any thoughts? I'm getting crickets. Wait, here I got one. I got a comment. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Highlighting successes and supporting change in meetings. Excellent. Yes, excellent. Another one from Robert. Understand and change the forces that preserve the old status quo. Yes. Periodically rediscuss at meetings from Scott. Thank you. Any other thoughts on what you might do to reinforce change? We've got some great ones here. I think meaningful recognition, understanding how people want to be recognized for the positive change they've made. There's some absence of negative consequences too, right? There's some accountability systems. I see model the behavior you're after, clearly define new processes or future state and capture this in performance management, get an influential parade leader on board to talk it up at the meetings as we go to. Nice. Sometimes it's that burning platform, right? So the old system is gone. So that helps to reinforce the new system. Management buy-in clarified by repeated references. Okay, so this idea of communication, keep that piece going. Create space for people to get training or practice. All right, lots of good examples. Thank you for sharing. So I think of reinforcement as really serving three purposes, right? One of them is sustaining the change and preventing individuals from slipping back to that original state. Two is really about building momentum during that transition, right? So you're trying to celebrate those small successes. And then three, creating a history that individual will remember the next time the change occurs. So a positive experience with the change. So those are all kind of involved as you're thinking about reinforcement. And I'm going to move on to resistance. And Kate already referred to this, right? This idea of there's resistance is to be expected. Right. And we know from a number of studies, the key reasons people resist again, around awareness. People don't understand, why are we doing this? The old system was working just fine. Why are we doing this? I think there's fear around change, right? Maybe there's layoffs. My job's going to change. I don't like where it's going. Maybe they don't feel like they have the skills to implement the change. Really like how things are working right now. It's working pretty well for them. And maybe they feel like, hey, this is just asking me to do more with less. So understanding that those are real factors in resistance. And I think that a key piece of resistance is, as a change leader, is listening, right? There may be some folks who really have some real insights. And so making sure that you're listening and responding to those reasons for resistance. So they could very well have a good point, and so being open to listening is a key part. So and we're going to do an exercise right after this slide, so I'm going to kind of prep you for that. But again, it's just a personal reflection exercise. But I wanted to show you how this ADKAR model can be used, not only as that planning tool, which I talked about earlier, but now really as an assessment tool, right? So here is an example of how ADKAR can be used as an assessment. In this example, we asked folks on the team to assess their own ADKAR scores, right? So they give themselves a grade of like 1 to 5 for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So in this slide, there's 4 different folks that all kind of rated their feelings about where they're at in the change process, right? You'll notice that not everyone is the same. That is not unusual, right? And so some folks are really struggling with desire. Maybe others are struggling on the reinforcement side. And this is where the leadership challenge begins, right? You need to have your finger on the pulse of where your team is at any given time. Maybe person D, and those are changing. So person D might slip back into desire when they get frustrated with the knowledge and ability pieces, right? So remember, the change happens at the individual level. So working with your team to usher them through the change is key, but not easy. So in this case, right, we use this guide as a way to identify a barrier point. And a barrier point is your lowest first score. So in this case, I think our lowest first score is around desire. So thinking about how you might build in or develop some strategies to help with that desire piece and creating change. So this is just an example of how you might use this in a team. What I would like to do now, any questions about, before I move into the worksheet, any questions about ADKAR, how this works? I'm looking at. All right, so I would like you to, Laurel's she's going to put this in the chat. Oh, there it is. So this is a Google Doc that you can open up. And this is just a personal reflection worksheet. So what I'd like you to do is think about a change you're leading. Doesn't have to be at work, could be at home, a personal change, and assess kind of your team's current ADKAR status, right? So for each, you're going to think about how you're doing on awareness, desire, knowledge, and then at the bottom, it asks you to think about, or first it asks you to identify your barrier, which is your lowest ADKAR score first, your first lowest score. And then think about some strategies that you could do to kind of overcome whatever that happens to be. And I'm hoping that we can spend some time as a large group just talking about what you've come up with and kind of kicking around ideas together. So I'm going to give 3 minutes, Kate. Does that sound good for folks to kind of think about this? I have 11:28, so my clock's a little slow. I'm going to do 3 minutes and then we'll be back. So personal exercise, download the Google Doc, do some thinking about how this might work in your life.
So Jen, there's a question in the chat that says, should we make a copy of this? I just heard you say, go ahead to download it from Google.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that.
And you don't necessarily have to fill it out on the sheet, but just kind of, filling it out on a piece of paper or whatever, and then just be thinking about what those strategies might be.
Great.
Oops. Got about a minute left or a few seconds if folks need to finish up. Did everyone get a chance to assess a change going on in your life, in your world? I hope you did. And then, would you like us to paste your answers? So I want to focus on that last question. So you don't have to post your answers to the ADKAR assessment, but I'm curious about what actions can you take or could you take to progress past your barrier point. So if you want to unmute and just share it, that'd be great. Just let us know where, this is the change I'm going through. This is where I think we're stuck. And this is some ideas I have, and we're going to kick it around. But you can paste them in the chat if you like. Robert says, I know what I think they think, but I don't know what they really think. So one of the tools that ADKAR would say is that you could send this to folks too and ask them to assess themselves. In this case, we're just kind of assuming we know what people are thinking. All right, so let's read. Scott here says, as low as ADKAR's awareness, I'm really aware of the changes because I'm on a particular committee, but my colleagues too often reflect that they don't feel like they don't know what is changing. The changes, we need to continue our discussion in staff meetings and in hallways and offices. I think management could also produce multiple small roadmaps and post them in our Microsoft Teams channel and discuss them at meetings. I think having a visual like this would be huge. Okay, all right. So, so Kate, in thinking about Scott's change, he's going to be the recipient of change. It sounds like in this case, he's not necessarily leading this change, but feeling like awareness is missing.
Yeah, that's right. Ames has merged into Do It, and it has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But I've been on one of the change management teams, so I know what's going on. But my colleagues who are not on that team, are not in those meetings, express too often that, well, they're stressing out, they're concerned, they're confused. And that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. So in terms of building awareness for your colleagues, you're recommending, looks like additional communication.
Right.
Roadmaps. Okay.
Little roadmaps of smaller pieces. We have a major roadmap that the managers of this change for us have been excellent, absolutely excellent. Roadmaps, the whole 9 yards. But sometimes there's tactical things, the devil's in the details. And so what I'm suggesting is that we have smaller roadmaps that are shared in our Teams channels and are discussed and can be re-referenced time and again as needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then I'd follow up with a question. Do you feel like there are any barriers that are keeping people from coming forward to offer solutions to communications or developing a roadmap, for example? Are there any other barriers?
Absolutely. The introverts tend to internalize their stress instead of communicating it out. And when they do communicate it out, there's a level of frustration there that is harmful to morale.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a role for you to communicate this in your situation, or you don't feel like that's a appropriate thing for you?
No, absolutely. I have a role. And not only that, I feel like management totally listens to the suggestions that any of us bring forth. It's really a beautiful environment, but still awareness is causing stress.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. All right. So focusing on that awareness piece is where you're going to be spending some time.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that. And then I see Janet said SMPH is reorganizing in the department IT people, and it was set before we heard anything about it. So it sounds like, Janet, you're referring again to that awareness piece, the why. Did you want to say anything more about it? All they tell us is business talk and no details. All right, so to me, this is kind of part of that awareness part, right? So why are we changing, and what is that future desired state? I think those are kind of wrapped up together in this one, it sounds like. thinking about how we might back up in this case and spend some more time. So jargon about silos and saying it's for us, but it doesn't feel that way. Okay. Right. So awareness building. Critical, right? People need to understand the why. Kate, did you have anything else you wanted to add about this one? Okay. Other thoughts, ideas, maybe some things that you're leading. If you had a team that you're leading, or even like I said, it can be a team of your family. It doesn't have to be a work team. I'm just thinking about how you might apply this tool in terms of leading a team and where you're seeing some challenges in terms of any of these ADKAR steps. Anyone feel comfortable unmuting and sharing their story? You have a quiet group.
I think sometimes, maybe, I don't know if management doesn't want to burden us with it or something, but sometimes I feel like they have to come up with the solution and then we have to implement, rather than saying, hey, here's the problem. We have an idea, but we'd like to hear what else might work too.
Yeah.
I mean, the reorg was certainly meant to solve some problem,
Mm-hmm.
and it might even be very well intentioned, but
They're jumping into the implementation before that.
Yeah, yeah.
Desire piece is there.
Or before the problem has clearly been stated, or maybe people have different problems they're trying to solve and they've all jumped on this thing that looked like it might solve their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And things are now really muddy because different people are expecting different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Janet's got your back there, Robert. She's giving you the ditto.
I'd just like to jump in there, Robert and Janet, and you can reach out to me if you want, and we can talk further. But the experience that we went through was so humane and so wonderful that if you would like to hear a little bit more about what Do It Leadership did to make the transition of Ames into Do It so humane and so it was just a wonderful experience. So Janet and Robert and anyone else, if you want to talk about what Do It Leadership did to facilitate that kind of an outcome, just let me know. We'll talk.
I would like to. I'm also learning that intentions don't necessarily come through, that people react according to their whole history. So management may have intended to do it humanely. They may have actually done it humanely. I'm not questioning that, but that may not have been what people saw.
Right.
Because people are seeing through a lens of every workplace experience they've ever had.
Yes, yes. And if they reached out to Jesse Henderson and Jenny Kvisted as to what their techniques were, top notch. Jenny and Jesse did an amazing job laying this whole thing out, and the people who were stressing out about it, I think it's because of an awareness issue, not because management didn't really work hard to explain what was going on. It's just that not everybody got the messages.
So I'm just wondering, Scott, could you summarize and what do you think was the main piece that they really did well that really resonated with you?
Yeah, they set up a transition monitoring team. So I was on the Ames transition monitoring team, and my responsibility had two parts, right? I had a responsibility to attend the meetings and bring forward the concerns that I was hearing. And then I had a responsibility to go back to the troopers that I work with and explain, what's going on. So at every staff meeting for, every week, we would have in our trooper staff meetings, time to discuss what happened at the transition monitoring team meeting every week. And so there was this fluid conversation that was built into the process that Jesse and Jenny designed. It was wonderful, but still there was stress because of awareness. Anyway, if people want to know about that, I really hold up what Jesse and Jenny did as an example of something that worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see Jenny's in this meeting. Hi, Jenny. Oh, absolutely, Janet. They totally listened to us. Totally. It was obvious that what we brought to the meetings was very, very important to Jenny and to, I'm blanking on Jamie's name, but anyway, yeah, all of the executives were just totally tuned into what we brought to them. They were like, oh, we didn't think of that. Thank you. So yeah, we were listened to definitely and valued. Jamie Gutkowski, yes. Thank you for that, Robert.
We've talked
It was a
quite
wonderful experience.
Thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate that. I'm just wondering, we focused a lot on awareness. I'm wondering if other folks had a different barrier point in their process of their project that they're leading or changing.
It's either desire or ability. It's hard to know how to characterize it. When we get together and talk about the change and do some planning, there's a lot of enthusiasm. And then things kind of fall on the floor, too busy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the desire maybe falls off when the actual work hits the fan kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't say no to something else, or I really don't know what to do next, or I don't know. It's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then Robert, too, I was thinking about ability, because
Yeah.
sometimes with change, for example, we had to go migrate to a new ticketing system. You know, I can't just quickly do the things that took me 30 seconds before. Now we're going to take me a 10-minute investment to figure out, okay, how do I do this in the new system? So that's where desire falls off, because I cannot accomplish what I need to accomplish in the amount of time that I have.
Mm-hmm. We talked about like lack of time, right? For that knowledge, building that knowledge and that ability can sometimes drive people back to desire, like, I'm not sure I want to spend my time here.
Yeah, that was my comment earlier about we're not, like, as an organization, it doesn't feel like we're built for change. We're built for like maximum delivery rate.
Mm-hmm.
And change takes effort, at least to get it started. Even if a change that makes you more efficient in the long run, there's always the hump to get over.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just don't have any headspace or breathing room, or even if you feel like you don't, it's really tough.
I'd like to add, Robert, that, you know, Jenny and Jesse didn't drive this whole train, because at the lower levels, for example, Dana Gerber Margie did a video. You know, it was 30 minutes long, and it took me 90 minutes to unpack the presentation that she gave. It was so wonderful. But anyway, the point is, Robert, that for this knowledge transfer, the lower level executives and managers and troopers created videos to show new people coming in to do it what the new skills are like. And it was wonderful.
So there was a question about clarifying the difference between knowledge and ability, right? So knowledge is knowing how to do it, and the ability is the actual ability to do it, right? So I gave the example of parenting, right? You can read parenting books, but the actual ability to implement in the moment is maybe a whole different animal. So I think there's a difference between kind of the knowing how and then the ability, maybe, and then the ability, like I said, can be affected by time and other things like we've mentioned today. Any other thoughts before we move on? Appreciate the conversation. Well, thank you for your willingness to try this on. I'm going to hand it over to Kate.
All right, well, there's some great examples there. And I just want to affirm that, you know, we like ADKAR. It's a great model. It's been tested, and it can be used as a framework for planning. It can be used as an assessment to identify where there may be gaps or areas that need more attention. And it can be used for shared language. And so having a shared language so that you can ask for the things that you need. You can say, hey, we don't have enough information. We need to build better awareness, or we need opportunities to build more knowledge and create space so people can develop the new skills that they need with the change. And so that's one of the things we really love about ADKAR. A lot of the things that have come up, there have been reference to feelings. How are people feeling about different aspects of the change? And actually, Robert Merrill, early on, you came off mute and shared that we're moving so fast. We don't always have time to look at the emotional impact of the work that we're doing or the change that's happening. And that's what we want to talk about, because while ADKAR is a great model, you can do everything perfectly and you still may have resistance. And that's why we like to combine it with the bridges model of change versus transition. And so this was developed by William Bridges. And as you can see, there are 3 phases in here. There's the experience of ending, losing and letting go. And so acknowledging what is ending for folks. It may be, the office I loved, or the process that I was so wedded to that I could do in my sleep and it was comfortable. The technology that I loved because I was part of creating it. What do people have to let go in order to embrace the change? And then there's the neutral zone. And more often than not, this is the longer term experience. In that first poll, the majority of folks came up to, I need more information. That's how I embrace change. And this is the space where people are waiting for more information. They're checking things out. They're seeing how colleagues are adapting. They're waiting for other pieces to be put in place. And that's the neutral zone, where more often than not, we're waiting. And then the new beginning. How do we acknowledge and celebrate that here we are, we've arrived, the change has been implemented, and hey, maybe it's working. And so what are the different stages that people go through, and what's that emotional trajectory? We like to talk about the difference between change and transition as, change is what happens one day and then happens the next day. For example, I moved last year. The change was I moved from one location one day to the second location the next day. And so that's the outcome. That may be when you go live with the new technology, for example. But transition is something different. Transition happens at a very individualized and personal level. And transition is about that inner process that people go through as they internalize and come to terms with the new situation that change brings about. And this is an important opportunity for empathetic leaders to recognize that change can put people in crisis. Change can really upset individual apple carts, so to speak, and have a deeply personal effect on people. And part of the leadership experience or the leadership role is really creating that space to listen, to allow people to share what they think or feel, to come forward with their experiences and their ideas. And so that's why we like to bring these 2 pieces together. The next piece of it, I'm sorry, there's another piece of this before we move on. So Jenny had shared this earlier. It's the Kubler-Ross approach to grief overlaid with the change model, and recognizing that people go through these stages at different times, and individuals go through these stages at different times. And you may have individuals at different stages at the same time, and it can be challenging for a change leader. It can be challenging for a colleague. So what do you do about that? And there are different ways based on the knowing of where people may be at. What are people asking for, either directly or indirectly? People may be asking for information. They may be asking for support. They may be asking to be involved, or they need some encouragement. And ultimately, people need clear direction for what that change is. And that's part of listening for the evidence of where people are on this curve and how to respond appropriately. So then a question came up, or I saw it as a question, but there was a reference to what's the climate in the organization. And that's a dynamic for change as well, too. Is it a climate where people can bring forward their ideas? Is it a climate where people feel penalized if they don't say they're on board? So what really is the climate in the organization you operate in where the change is being taking place? And that includes diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so what are the value systems and the organizational culture? And that can have a direct impact on how employees react and participate in change. We recognize that change management approaches, the ADKAR framework, can also be used when incorporating formal diversity, equity, inclusion efforts into the organization. So it's not just thinking about DEI in our change, it's also how do we use these frameworks, tools, and understanding of change to adopt and incorporate DEI initiatives in our organizations. We recognize that fundamentally, people want to be included and they want to participate in the improvement efforts. And then, of course, we've been talking a lot about psychological safety across this campus. And what does that mean? And so using the definition from Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard University, psychological safety really is the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes, and that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Well, as you can imagine, you're planning for change, you're going through the implementation of change. People want to feel safe and being able to bring forward their concerns their questions, their ideas, their solutions. And so is that part of the culture and climate within your organization? And so we offer up 5 ways from the Center for Creative Leadership on creating psychological safety, and that is making it an explicit priority, naming it and making it a priority, facilitating space for everyone to speak up. So what are those listening sessions that may be happening as you're preparing for change or going through the different stages in the process of change? How are you establishing new norms for how failure is handled? So what's not working well? How can people bring forward feelings or express their concerns? How are you creating space for new ideas, even seemingly wild ones? So how do people bring forward their contributions to the change process or to the outcomes? And then, of course, embracing productive conflict. Conflict doesn't have to be about people. It can be about different ideas. And conflict can be used to spark creativity and new solutions. And so a quick summary before we open it up to any final questions. And that is, we recognize that the size and type of change determines how much and what kind of change management is needed. Whether you're changing a new process in a research lab, or you're changing the campus-wide rollout of Workday or the system-wide rollout of Workday, your change response should be in proportion to the level of change that's happening. Employees go through changes in stages and as individuals. Not everybody's at the same place at the same time. Not everybody's feeling the same thing at the same time. As we've mentioned, resistance is the norm, not the exception. And sometimes having the right answer, the right best answer, still isn't enough to get past the resistance or to convince people that they should get on board and that change is going to be a good thing for them. Change agents at all levels of the organization must be conscious of both what the sender's meaning is and the receiver's interpretation. Our best intent may not always achieve the best impact. Our value systems and our organizational culture have a direct impact on how employees react to change. Do you have a culture that embraces change? Do you have a culture that is fearful of something new? Do you have a culture where people can talk openly? Or do you have a culture where people are afraid to express themselves or bring their ideas forward? And then, of course, always we recommend that visible and active sponsorship is necessary for change. And I would expand that to say champions. Visible and active champions at all levels in your organization are important for change. So with that, Jen, do we have time for questions?
I have 5 minutes remaining.
Yes, we have 5 minutes.
So I'd love to hear any of your questions. I see Scott said change champions are key. Experienced troopers who other troopers respect. Any other questions about going through change, leading change? The word trooper is better than resource. Thank you, Robert. Any thoughts, questions, reactions? We also have some additional resources here.
And of course, Jen and I are available by email. You can reach out to the Office of Strategic Consulting. We have a few resources on our website, and we're always happy to answer any questions that you have, or if you want to talk further about what may be happening within your specific unit at any time.
All right, so I said keeping an eye on the goal as the goal comes into focus is also key. Do you want to talk more about that, Scott?
Yeah, sure. So, when Jenny and Jesse and the rest of us would meet in these meetings, the goal in general terms was clearly stated right up ahead, right? I mean, in the broadest form, we had a mission statement. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. But again, the devil's in the details. And so one of the beautiful things about those meetings was that we collaboratively discussed, where is this going? What are we nervous about? What are our vulnerabilities here? What are our risks? And it was a total team effort between executives, management, and like I said, at my level, I call us troopers. Yeah, it was key.
Sounds like you had a lot of open dialogue and opportunities to kind of share perspectives.
Absolutely. And so if Janet and Robert aren't looking at that same kind of a railroad track going down the road to their change, then reach out to me and I can, maybe point you to people that I think did it right.
It's great to hear some positive stories of great change that's happened.
Sure is.
Mhm.
Any other comments before we wrap up? Well, I really appreciate you joining our session today. And like I said, Kate said, if you have any questions, our contact information is on the slide deck. So thank you.